4-1/2b Eros by Malcolm Jameson.
4-1/2b Eros.
A strange code, but grizzled space trader Karns used it to break the perilous Mercury-Venus Jinx.
Mackie chop chop. Pway. Pway.
The two New Zealand coolies squatted down between the shafts and with one quick motion elevated the sedan chair to shoulder height. Then they started off in a lazy run through the torrential downpour, splashing mud right and left as their sturdy yellow legs struck into the watery lane of muck that passes for a road in Venusberg. Captain Karns, the lone trader, sank back in his seat and watched idly with mild blue eyes as first one grass hut and then another appeared momentarily through rifts of rain. There would be time enough to worry about Cappy Wilkinson's plight when he reached the administration building and found out more about the charges against him. No doubt it was just another shakedown, the effort of some minor official to pry loose a little more than the customary cumshaw. Captain Karns had berthed his own old trading tub not an hour earlier, and as he registered the arrival of his swapper he noted that under the date of 3 days before there was the entry,
Wonder Captain Wilkinson, en route Mercury to Lunar.
After it was the notation in red.
Detained by Rhoda collector, the port captain in custody.
Karns thoughtfully poured his long white beard. Cappy Wilkinson was a careful and upright man, and a lifelong friend who what manner of charge could they have trumped up against him? That they were trumped up he took for granted, for the local government of autonomous Venus was notoriously corrupt and always had been. The Venezuelans themselves were the descendants of coolies brought centuries before from tropical Asia. They took little or no interest in government. Politics had, therefore, fallen into the hands of white adventurers, most of whom lived on Venus for the very good reason they were not wanted elsewhere. The Central Council of the loose Interplanetary Federation seldom interfered with them unless for acts so flagrant as to affect the Federation as a whole. The old space merchant left his chair at the courtroom and squeezed through the crowd at the back just in time to hear the whack, whack, whack of the gavel marking the end of the trial. Standing defiantly in the prisoner's box was Cappy Wilkinson, his eyes flashing and his iron grey mane thrown back. He looked like an indignant old lion brought to bay by a pack of jackals. The judge, a young man with a monocle and a stiff black pompadour, was dressed in a smart military uniform which made him appear anything but judicial. He was biting out his words as if what he was saying was inspired by personal venom.
I've heard all you have had to say, including your filthy imputations as to the integrity of this court. Your guilt is so apparent that we need not trouble even to preserve the record of your silly and malicious allegations.
Here the judge contemptuously tossed a sheaf of papers into a wastebasket.
Therefore, bearing in mind not only your guilt but your contumacious conduct before me, I sentence you to 5 years at hard labor in such a one of our prison camps as the Director of Welfare and Beneficence may select. It is further directed that your ship, together with its illicit contents, be confiscated and sold at public auction in order to defray the cost of these proceedings. Marshal, take him away.
Karns was on his feet at once, elbowing and pushing his way forward through the departing throng of curiosity seekers. His voice was shrill with indignation.
Hey, you can't do that,
he yelled. Officials closed in on him at once, and the judge's face grew red with anger.
This is a court of law,
he said.
and the decisions of the presiding judge are final.
Now get out before I haul you up for contempt.
Tarnation damn,
Muttered Karns as he turned and left the building. This was no ordinary shakedown. This called for action, and quick action, for it was unthinkable that his body should be carted off to the insect-infested, fever-ridden, infamous Great Swamp of Venus. White men lived but a few months there a year, let alone 5 years, was as good as life. A bulletin caught his eye, and as he read it he gasped. The paste that fastened it to the board was still wet, but the paper bore characteristics of printed type. It must have been prepared at least a day ago. It read, Collector's Sale. 1 confiscated tube ship, the Wanderer, complete with fittings. The cargo of the same consisting of miscellaneous trade goods. Saturday. Inquire at collector's office for details.
Phil,
Gasped Karns.
That was quick work. And planned.
He turned and made his way to the collector's office. The man at the front desk gaped at him woodenly.
"It's already sold."
He said indifferently, the third time Karns put his question.
"But it says Saturday."
Okay, it says Saturday. So what? But this is only Tuesday. We have a Saturday every week, Dodo. Now trot along and annoy somebody else for a change. I have work to do.
Hank Karns blinked. Why, Saturday was the day the Wonder docked. These Venusians were getting raw. They must have sold her that very day.
Who is that old man? Throw him out.
Karns turned slowly and viewed the new speaker. He was a big man, with piercing black eyes and a hawk nose, and heavily bearded, a strange sight for supertropical Venus where men kept clean-shaven for coolness. But the man turned abruptly away and entered an inner office, slamming the door behind him. Hank Karns' eyes followed him all the way. They were fixed on the back of the fellow's neck. There, oddly enough, just above the shoulder line, peeped a line of color demarcation. Above the line, which was made visible by the fact that its wearer had pulled open his collar for comfort, the skin was the normal pallor usually seen on Venus below. It was a mottled chocolate color.
Did you hear what the collector said?
Snarled the clerk.
Scram.
Without a word, Hank Karns turned and left the office. He passed through the thronged corridors almost in a daze. There was Cappy Wilkerson, gone to the swamp, virtually condemned to death. There was the ship sold, even before the trial which was to condemn it. And everywhere there was high-handed insolence, seemingly inspired by this overbearing man with the duplex complexion. What did it mean? And the fact that he could not yet place those sharp eyes and that predatory nose, though somewhere, sometime, he had encountered them before, puzzled Hank Karns still more. Something stank in Venus. An hour later he sat morose in a tiny tavern he had long known, hidden up the blind alley known as Artemis Lane. For half a century it had been familiar to him as the hang-up for his kind.
So you see how it is.
The bartender was concluding.
At this rate there won't be any more. With all the old-timers dead, or in the swamp, how in hell can I keep running? No sir, this joint is for sale for what it'll bring. Drink up and have another.
Captain Karns took the proffered drink from the grizzled tavern keeper, but despite its cheering nature, for it was purest.
Calm it do.
He took it glumly. Never in all his long and active life had he heard so much evil news at one sitting. Another of his old pals had come to grief, and all because he had touched at Mercury. Mercury, it appeared, was poison to all his tribe. The record was too consistent to be accounted for by coincidence. Coincidences do not occur in strings.
And what makes it stink all the worse?
Persisted the indignant bartender, bitterly.
Not a damn finger is lifted to stop the flow of trilobane. The town is lousy with it. Half these natives stay hopped up all the time. I thought the Federals had cleaned that up 10 years ago.
Commented Hank Karns.
It's back.
Was the laconic retort. Hank Karns said nothing. The fact that 3 of his buddies were languishing in the malarial swamps of Venus, continually subject to the indignities of brutal guards, was uppermost in his mind. And besides that, 2 others, Bill Ellison and Jed Carter, had died on Mercury when their ships mysteriously blew up on the takeoff. That, too, had an especial significance, for those 2 were the only members of the trader tribe who had any sort of reputation as fire-eaters. In their youth, of course, all of them had been bolder and more truculent, but as they gained in experience they learned that there is more to be gained by soft words than bluster. If Hank was to secure the release of his friends, it must be by guile, the use of a cunning superior to that employed by their common enemies. If he was to secure, there was no if about it. He must. For it was Bob Merrill and Ben Wilkerson who had once rescued him, Hank Karns, from an even more deadly situation. More than 20 years ago that had been, on far-off EO, and Hank Karns winced at the memory of it. On that occasion he had, through the machinations of the notorious Von Kleber gang, been convicted and sentenced as a pirate. 10 hateful and horror-filled days and nights he had spent in the mines of San Esperance, the federal penitentiary, digging radioactive ores. 2 of his friendly competitors heard of it and pled for a new trial wherein it was shown that he had been sent up through perjured testimony to screen the trial of the real culprits. The wave of public opinion they started then did not subside until von Kleber and his outlaws were put finally behind the bars. No, there was no choice. Cappy Wilkerson and Cappy Merrill must be released and Ellison and Carter avenged. How? That remained to be seen.
Well,
Trolled Hank Karns elaborately, now that his mind was made up.
I'll be seeing you. I'm taking a little trip into Mercury and back.
The bartender shook his head ominously.
No fool like an old fool,
He said, and he didn't laugh. In the rainlock, or the vestibule outside the bar, Karns stopped. He felt inside the lining of his vest and after much fumbling produced a dog-eared memorandum book. He ran through the yellowed pages until he found one covered with cryptic entries. They appeared as if made long ago, but several interlineations in various colored ink showed that amendments had been made from time to time since the original writing of them. Halfway down was the group P2, and what followed had been twice changed. The line that stood in lieu of them read,
BBD Wickower 4-1/2B Eros.
Hank Karns read the line through 2 or 3 times, then snapped the book shut and replaced it in its hiding place. He carefully buckled up his slicker and jammed his ulster tight upon his head. Then he stepped forth into the steamy drizzle of Artemis Lane. He sloshed his way through mud and water until he came to the main drag. He turned to the right and splashed along until he came to the corner where a Roseville road turned off. He took the turn and plugged along for 4 blocks of its twisting, body length. A dozen steps farther on he lifted his eyes and peered from beneath dripping brows at the signs about. Across the street was what he saw a sagging awning crudely painted with the legend,
And sugar dealer in native basketry.
On the bejeweled window below was another.
Horseback Anglass.
Hank Karns stopped under the awning long enough to squish some of the water out of his shoes, then he entered. A swarthy, turbaned Venusian met him, rubbing his hands together obsequiously and bowing jerkily at every step.
Yes, my lord. Welcome to miserable shop. That vicious, my lord? Wickaware,
said Hank Karns tartly for him.
for export. Oh,
Breathed the representative of Ensugar.
chiplods, eh? You pay?
Captain Khan shook his head and pointed to the private door at the back.
Vickware. No pay. Maybe boss at sea, eh? Yep, try him out.
Said Hank Karns and began fingering the clever basketware of the Venusian hillman. He knew it would be quite a while before the Earthman came, if this was operated like the Khalistan branch had been 20 years before. After a time, without quite knowing how he knew, he was aware that someone else was in the showroom, studying him from a distance.
Howdy.
He said, turning around.
I kinda wanted to finance a deal that's too big for me to swing. Is this the place?
Might be.
Said the man noncommittally. He was a typical terrestrian businessman, not much over 30, boldish, and plainly not given to foolishness.
I don't touch anything as a rule unless I see a profit in it. And no chance of loss. What is your collateral?
Hank Karns mentioned his ship. The man snorted and started to turn away.
You're wasting time. I got a ring too. It's a well-sought heirloom.
The man came back. He was still not interested, but he took the ring Karns offered him and weighed it in his hand. Then he applied a loupe to his eye and examined it closely.
You've hawked this before. Yes.
Chuckled Hank Karns.
And got it back too.
Said the man.
It looks genuine. What do you want? I am dropping into Mercury to do a little trading. When I get back, I might want to buy a chair or so, mep a house full of stuff, and just wanted to be sure my credit was good. You speak in riddles, my friend.
Said the man with a curious, tight little smile. He was tossing the ring thoughtfully all the while.
I'm only a lone trader.
said Hank Karns wistfully.
And don't know no better. Supposing you keep the ring while I'm gone to appraise it, so to speak. All I want to know is who to call for when I get back. If I get back.
The man pocketed the ring.
Where will the call come from? I dunno. Space, Meb. Gale, Meb. My radio call is Care Assistant Dockmaster, Veniceburg Skyard. Mention berth 23 SML. As to the jail angle, I do not as a general thing do business with people in jail. In that event, I might send you a lawyer in consideration of this ring. Tell Rashab, the night 10 key, you'll know him by the double scar on his chin, that you want to see Mr. Brown. I can't guarantee he'll go, but if he does, bear in mind he's a very cagey fellow and that Veniceburg jail is studded with dictaphones and scanners. If what you have in mind smacks at all of illegality, it's likely he'll walk out on you.
Yep.
Snapped Hank Karns, beginning to shut the clasps on his slicker.
I remember. Only I don't think it'll be a lawyer I'll need.
If the joint is lousy with spy machines, what I want is an old friend, a man of my type.
The man, whatever his name was, for he had still not given it, laughed outright for the first time. He slapped the lone trader on the back.
Men of your type, you old humbug, are extinct as the horse.
Hank Karns looked up to laugh back at him, but he was gone. In his place stood the turbaned Venusian, still doing washing motions with his hands.
My lord, no like Vic there. My lord, go now. My lord, yes. I go now.
Karns jammed on his sou'wester, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door. A half hour later he was making ready for the takeoff for Mercury. It was a shot in the dark, but it was a chance he had to take.
To hell with that.
Thought Hank Karns. Then briskly to the boy he had brought with him the strip as a general utility man.
Hey, Billy, look alive. Bear hand with getting them their rig stowed.
So that's Mercury,
exclaimed Billy Hatch, 4 days later, as he stared goggle-eyed into the visiplate. This was his first interplanetary trip.
Yep,
said Karns.
That's her, the Dardanetist planet barren none in a whole dad-frazzled system. After you've been here you can tell 'em you've seen wind blow, and I mean blow. That's what them rakes is for. To get around you lie down on your belly and pull yourself along by them. It's a hell of a place. The sun on your back to fry you, excepting there's always a ice-cold hurricane cooling you off. How can that be, Captain? Convection's the tensile word for it. It's 'cause she's sizzling hot on one side and cold in the underside of iceberg on the other. The wind goes straight up over the desert and comes straight down over the backside glaciers. Then it scoots for the desert again, and how? Nobody could live an hour in any part of the place if it weren't for the temperate strip, and that's cockeyed enough. You got a steady 100-200 mile wind going straight into the sun, for that's right down to the horizon. In the lee of a house you burn up, in the shade of it you'd freeze solid in 5 minutes. And the houses have to be stone and streamlined.
Hank Karns kept a watchful eye on the terrain coming up to meet them. Mooring his ship in that wind required the utmost art.
As I told you, it's a hell of a place. Nothing grows there but a sort of grass and some moss. The only animals is varmints, like the kingrella and the troglodyte. It's kingrella claws and troglodyte hides we trade for.
Billy Hatch listened, wide-eyed. This was romance.
The troglodyte is a critter something on the order of an armadillo, only it's got horns and big claws to hang onto the ground. It grazes, with its head loose into the wind. The kingrella is built along the lines of a crab and has claws too. It crawls up behind the troglodyte and kills 'em while they're feeding. Troglodyte scales and kingrella claws are both hard in hell. They use 'em in machinery.
Oh,
said Billy Hatch.
But you better get forward there and tend to them grapples, 'cause they getting hold of the ground here is ticklish business. If we miss it's just too bad. We'll roll over and over for miles and miles, like as not.
Hank Karns said no more for a time. As a matter of fact, he was far from ready to land. He had deliberately come up on the wrong side of the planet for making the landing at Sam Atkins' little trading store. He wanted to give it a general bird's-eye view. It was in a valley scooped out by the wind that he saw the first sign of a major alteration. Behind a huge artificial windbreak lay a group of new buildings, and one of them was dome-topped with a squat chimney. A matter of 10 miles farther away was another new house and a small warehouse behind it. Just over the next low ridge lay Atkins' place.
Stand by,
warned Hank Karns as he brought the ship's nose into the hurricane and began losing altitude.
Don't let go till I tell you, and that'll be when we're practically down.
Just as the keel kissed the ground, Karns gave the signal and their anchors fell. At the same instant he cut his rockets and the ship began falling away to leeward, dragging her anchors behind. In a moment they grabbed, pulled loose and grabbed again. That time they held. Karns released a long pent-up sigh. It was a perfect landing. Sam Atkins' house lay but a bare 100 yards on the quarter. There was still the business of shooting a wire over the trading post and making it fast at both ends, Atkins coming out to do his share. Then Captain Karns slid down the wire to the shack and allowed himself to be holden by the trading post keeper.
I'm glad to see you, Captain, and sorry at the same time,
was his greeting from Sam Atkins. Atkins was a grumpy sort and a self-made hermit. He seemed to enjoy the solitude of windward Mercury and the tedious, strenuous work of snaring kingrellos.
How come sorry, Sam?
Asked Hank Karns as innocently as if he had never visited Venus. Atkins looked mournfully at him and jerked a thumb eastward.
I've got neighbors, bad ones. Whatever you do, don't go over there. They'll trick you somehow. They don't want outsiders coming here, they've got a ship of their own that makes a trip every week or so.
Hank Karns raised his eyebrows.
Trocklebecks must be breeding faster, they used to.
He observed.
Mercury never produced enough to justify more than 2 trips a year, if that.
Trocklebecks,
stated Atkins,
are practically extinct. And the kingrellers are starving. I doubt if I could scare up 4 cases of prime claws to save my soul. It's Pagras that's doing it. The place is crawling with them. They bite the trocklebecks and they curl up and die.
Commented Hank Karns. He remembered those serpents well. They were originally a Venusian beast, a variety of dragon, and extremely venomous. They were really legged snakes, having 36 pairs of talon legs and crab-like claws near the head, but the body was slender, rarely exceeding a yard in girth for all their 30-foot lengths.
I'm closing up shop here,
said the gloomy Atkins next.
You can take the pick of what I own if you'll set me down at the next stop you make. Now you just keep your shirt on, Sam Atkins,
replied Hank Karns.
I'm not doing anything of the damn kind. I'm going over and have a talk with those gents in the next valley.
Sam Atkins glared at him.
No fool like an old fool,
he remarked hopelessly. Hank Karns chuckled.
Seems folks are agreed pretty well about me. But let's eat so I can get along my way.
Unmooring and getting in the anchors was a troublesome job with only a green boy for a helper, but Hank Karns managed it. At that it was a much easier maneuver to move the ship that mile over the ridge than to try to call it in the teeth of a permanent typhoon. Moreover, if there was cargo to take aboard and Hank Karns felt sure there would be, the ship would have to be moved anyhow. So he took off, circumnavigated the planet, and came up again, this time to the little office building and warehouse next to Atkins' shack. He took good care not to go near the other group of buildings. As he descended, casting about for a good spot to fling out his grapnels, he kept a sharp eye out for signs of life about the buildings. All he saw was a couple of bronze men, both bald as billiard balls, working over some object in the lean of the warehouse. Upon sighting the descending spaceship, one went inside the warehouse and the other caught hold of the guide wire and let himself be blown down to what appeared to be the office building. The man had on a heavily quilted suit of grey material, quilted so that if he lost his hold and was blown away, he would not bruise himself to death along the ground. On the 4th try, Hank Karns managed to ground his ship not far from the office door. This time, he landed to leeward and had to make his way upwind by crawling, assisted by a Mercurian
staff,
or one of the rakes among his trade goods. As he crawled, he observed he was being watched from a loophole beside the door. But as he drew himself erect, the door opened and a man came out to greet him.
Hello, Captain.
said the man cordially.
We're very glad to see you. Come in and rest yourself.
The man, Karns observed, was dressed in a heavily quilted suit and was breathing heavily. But he had a full head of hair and a luxuriant mustache.
Howdy, yourself,
returned the lone trader.
Pho. It's sure dusty hereabouts. I've heard of the place, but I never seen it. The 5 Trojans is my bailiwick and the asteroids in that corner. Really?
said the man, helping his visitor through the door. The office was a single room, and no one else was in it. There was a bottle of violet-hued liquor on the table and 2 glasses.
Have a drink? This is homebrew, our Mercurian version of comet dew made from flowers that grow under the glacial lips. Don't care if I do,
remarked Karns, and sat down in the seat indicated.
As I was saying, I thought I'd look in on this place, seeing as how I had to make the perihelion hop home. Have to get home to see my oldest grandchild married.
Wouldn't be interested in a bit of cargo, would you?
asked the man.
Our own ship is overdue, and I have some freight for Venus. I'm always interested in a bit of cargo,
said Karns.
But this trip I can't stop by. Venus time's too short. Oh well,
said his host, indifferently.
It doesn't matter about that. I was thinking of shipping some boxes of claws and hides to our agent at Venusberg for sale there. We are a new company and have no outlets on Terra yet, unless you wanted to speculate on your own account and buy them outright. Speculation's my business,
said Karns, serene and bland, and added, with just a touch of foxiness,
if the buying price is right. Oh, we won't quarrel about that,
laughed the man.
The hides are a byproduct with us. This is a pharmaceutical outfit. We make a preparation from the hormones of these beasts. You can have the horns at almost any price.
They spent the better part of an hour in good-natured haggling, the childlike old man raising first one trivial objection after another to win small advantages, chiefly in the matter of valuation of the various items of trade goods he had to offer. None of the lone traders ever dealt in cash. The swapper was most appropriately named. At last they shook on the bargain, and a bargain it most obviously was from the trader's point of view. Mr. Railroad Mint, or so the company man styled himself, presented the visiting captain 2 flasks of the violet liquor after the old custom of the trade.
Nice stuff,
observed Karns, licking his lip.
The best I ever. There's 12 cases of it in the warehouse,
said Dement with a wink.
Now, if you were the smuggling salt, there would be a nice profit for you. But of course. Hell,
exploded Karns.
Running comet dew's no sin. Wished I had a decimmer for every gallon I've hold. Once at a coon's age I get stuck with a little fine, but shucks, the customer will lose pay that for you.
There followed more dickering, but the upshot of it was that Karns signed up for everything that had been offered him.
Bon voyage,
said Mr. Dement.
If you ever pass this way again, drop in and visit. Sure will,
said Karns, looking his man in the eye. He was interested in his host's forehead. About an inch from the right temple there was a slight depression, the ineradicable scar of an old skull injury. Mercury was still a big disk behind when the swapper straightened out on her earthward trajectory.
Step alive there, Billy, we got lots to do.
All the blandness, all the gullibility and childlike faith were gone from Karns' face now. He looked much more like a work-ridden gnome than an emaciated Santa Claus. For they had unpacked every case and strewn its contents on the deck, looking for contraband of a more serious nature than the hummus comet dew. But no case contained anything except what the invoice declared. Hank left the job of repacking to the boy and went about a minute's search of the ship itself. In that he was not a moment too soon. Behind the control board, hidden under the vine-like mass of electric leads, were 2 thermobombs. The detonating coils were already hot. The control board was divided into 3 panels, each controlling an opposite pair of the 6 tubes which were arranged hexagonally about the stern. 2 of the panels were about to be ruined by fire. Karns' first impulse was to snatch the bombs loose and let them burn out harmlessly on the deck, but suddenly he checked it. Instead, he withdrew his hand and stuck his blistered fingers in his mouth. Then he shouted a warning to Billy Hatch.
Hey,
Stand by for a blast. Bring an extinguisher, quick.
The boy ran up, but nothing happened for several minutes. Then the two boards flashed fire. They put the fire out, but the damage was done. The swapper was not nearly up to acceleration. She could never get to Earth at that velocity. She would have to limp into Venus on her two remaining tubes and have yard electricians renew her wiring. Pretty neat, said Karns, admiringly contemplating his ruined controls.
I did the best I could, Captain,
said Billy, modestly, thinking the compliment was meant for him.
You did all right, son,
said the skipper.
Supposing you turn in now. I'll do what's left.
Karns did not at once change course for Venus. He was still unsatisfied that he knew all he should know about his ship and its seemingly innocuous cargo. It was too obvious to miss that Dement had ordered the bombs planted to ensure the swappers going into Venus. It was an easy guess that the suggestion to take liquor on board was a device to ensure the ship's arrest and the confiscation that was sure to follow, the New Zealand courts being what they were. But to Karns' suspicious mind there was much more to it than that. In the first place, he could have obviated both. He could have snatched the bombs before they exploded, and he could yet jettison the liquor. Moreover, if the mere elimination of all visitors to Mercury was what they were after, those bombs could just as well have been a ferric site and designed to destroy the ship entirely, as was done in the case of the openly hostile Merrill and Carter. No, the master plot required the swapper to go into Venus and be done away with there. Why? He thought that over. Suddenly he arose and unlocked his little safe. From its feed container he withdrew a small pellet of radium and set up his fluoroscope. Then he dragged out one of the trockleback hides. He searched it systematically from horn to stubby tail, from the scaly back to the claws of the feet. Then he put his fluoroscope away. Grinning into his beard, he went aft and got a pair of pliers, a hammer and a cold chisel. One of the horns came away as he screwed it off. He knew already from its fluorescence that it was hollowed out and filled with some substance, but he wanted to make sure. He shook the pale green powder inside out into his palm and sniffed it. Yes, that was it. There was the unmistakable odor of crushed cherries and the sickish sweetness of the hashish of the sky's trilobane. Now he was getting somewhere. And as he split a few back scales at random, he found that each had a few grams of the insidious drug within it. One such hide would supply a retail peddler for many months, each scale a separate delivery. He delayed no longer. He shifted his course toward Venus and at the same time sat down to his radio key. He sent
Urgent Venusberg Sky Yard.
Attention, Assistant Dockmaster. 4 tubes disabled, the can switchboard fire. Please reserve for me berth 23. Litigation in prospect. Can you recommend lawyer? Signed Karns, Captain T.S. Swapper.
Well,
he said to himself as he carefully swept up the telltale green dust from the deck and added it to the bundle of broken scales and needy board and threaded horns preparatory to firing it all through the garbage tube into his wake.
I shot my wad.
Now let's see how smart Mr. Brown turns out to be.
He learned very soon that the thermobombs were but an added precaution. He had not been waiting more than a couple hours when his loudspeaker began to buzz. He glanced at it in surprise, as he was still a long way from Venus. The message began coming through, harsh and peremptory.
Lay to, Swapper, to receive a boarding party. Lay to, or take the consequences. Skyguard calling. Lay to.
Karns cut his rockets and went to the airlock to await the arrival of the cruiser. It was not long in coming. 2 smartly uniformed young officers sprang in.
Let's see your manifest,
ordered one curtly, while the other headed for the hold. In a moment the second came back with 2 flasks of the pale violet comet dew.
The old boy is lassie with the stuff,
he reported to the other.
cases and cases of it.
This,
said the first.
and not a damn word about it in the manifest. This makes the second one of these old coots we've hauled up this month. What do you say? Shall we call this one conspiracy? Why not?
Countered the other. Karns said nothing beyond the usual blustering protest that would be expected of him. Then he lapsed into silence as the two took over after ordering their own vessel to proceed. They did not go to the commercial sky yard, but to the official one. Other officers met them, and Karns was led straight away to jail. He protested every step of the way, demanding to be taken before the terrestrial resident commissioner, or to be booked in the usual way. Both those demands were refused, whereupon he asked for a lawyer.
Don't kid yourself, old man,
said one of his guards.
You're in Venus now.
Here you are.
There he was. There was no question about that. The bardos landed behind his departing escort with an air of utter finality.
Hiya, Pop,
screamed some hoodlum down the corridor.
What's you in for?
After that nothing happened. Karns looked about him at his cramped cell and settled down to make the best of it. It would be tiresome, locked up alone this way, but in a day or so perhaps the mysterious Mr. Brown would put in his appearance. The next day came, but no Mr. Brown. However, early in the morning another visitor came in his place. Karns heard footsteps approaching and the jangle of keys. His door was flung open and a tall stranger stepped in. The man was quite old and clad in the blue uniform, faded and patched, of a space skipper. He was obviously a lone trader, but if he was the only one in the universe that Karns did not know. For this man, with his beetling grey eyebrows and hard steely eyes beneath, he had never laid eyes on before.
2 minutes, no more,
warned the guard, and stood back in the corridor where he could both see and hear.
Howdy, Hank,
said the newcomer.
Danged if it ain't getting so that Tom Bagley spends half his time bailing you out or paying fines. Why, I'd hardly landed here but what I heard you'd been slung into the calaboose again, and I says to myself, says I, "Yek, Tom, I know,"
said Karns penitently, trying not to look at the eavesdropping guard. Inwardly he was seething with doubt and curiosity. Could it be that this was some minion of the collector trying to trick him, or was he acting for Mr. Brown? He remembered telling the fellow in the wickerware place that what he really needed was a man of his own type. Maybe they had found one. At any rate, he chose to pretend he knew him.
Anyhow,
went on the stranger,
I looked up a fella named Brown that I know here and asked him what to do.
he said things looked pretty black and his advice was to plead guilty and say nothing.
Might get off with a fine or something. And that he had a little money of yours.
He got me this pass, but said he couldn't work it twice.
Now tell me, Hank, what do you want me to do?
I got to get out of here for Mercury in a day or so.
Karns looked at the man steadily for a moment. He was on the spot. The man was evidently from Brown, but he knew neither of them personally. But worse, the guard was listening to every word, and there were doubtless dictaphones as well. But the 2 minutes were running out and there would not be a second visit.
I'll tell you, Tom, there isn't but one thing you can do. I'll have to take my medicine, I guess, but I hate like everything to lose them troglodyte hides and horns. The critters is dying off poisoned by peggers. Them dying snakes are all over Mercury. You might not have money enough to buy 'em in, but sort of keep track of 'em, won't you? They're not worth much now, but they'll be mighty valuable someday. There's a man here from Eros that'll pay a good price for 'em, if you can find him. Time's up,
snapped the guard coming forward.
All right, you old scalawag,
said the phony trader captain, jovially.
I'll do my best.
But what's your step with that gent?
He's tough,
I know.
said Karns despondently, and settled his face in his hands. The door slammed and the footsteps withdrew, ringing emptily down the metal passage. Dreary day followed dreary day. Time after time Karns heard footsteps ringing in the corridor, and as often he heard the rattle of keys as some door was opened and another unfortunate was ordered out to meet his doom, the sentence that was to change his state from slow dry rot to the swift wet rot of the swamp. But it was never Karns' door. Then at last came the day when guards took him to the identical court where Wilkerson had been tried. The evidence was brief and to the point. He was apprehended trying to sneak into Venus when his clearance papers called for Terra as his destination. He had on board 8 cases of illicit liquor. He had no acceptable explanation. Guilty. 2 years in the swamp and the loss of his ship was the sentence. Then they took him back to his cell to await the next caravan to the penal camps. The second stretch of waiting was harder to take than the first, for he had placed the enigmatic collector now in his memory. The man was von Kleber, thought to have died many years ago in the uranium mines of Sans Esperance. Karns knew him to be a convict from the fact that he had grafted new skin on his face and head so that the burns and baldness caused by radioactivity would not show. But that he was the notorious von Kleber himself had not occurred to him. And with that recognition came the other. Raoul Dement was the man known as Frenchy the Hop, vice president of the von Kleber ring. It was he who had operated the narcotic racket while the big boss turned his attention to such other lines as piracy, white slaving and smuggling in general. If such men could flourish unchecked in the well-policed Jovian satellites for more than a decade, it was hopeless to expect to dislodge them from the place on corrupt and autonomous Venus. And so time dragged on and Hank Karns sat, awaiting the day when he would be taken away to the swamp. He wondered apathetically whether he would be sent to the same camp where Wilkerson and Hildreth were. But at last there came a day when footsteps rang again in the corridors and he heard doors being opened and men taken away. Finally men stopped before his own cell and called him forth. Between 2 soldiers they marched him away. To his surprise they took him first to the street, where 3 sedan chairs were waiting. The guards very politely indicated that Karns was to get in the middle one, and they took the others. Hank clambered in and they set off. Shortly they drew up before the courthouse. He was met inside by a tall, slender man of nearly his own age who wore the uniform of Chief Inspector of the Interplanetary FBI.
How are you, Captain?
He said cheerily.
Sorry you had such a long stay in jail, but we'll try to make that up to you.
Come in here and let me show you something.
Hank Karns looked at the inspector in amazement. He was Frank Haynes, the man who had broken the von Kleber case years before. There had been a time when they worked closely together on the information that Karns furnished when he was released from Sans Esperance. He said nothing in reply, though, as Haynes was leading the way into the courtroom. In the dock were 2 bolt-headed prisoners, von Kleber, erstwhile collector of the port, and Mr. Dement, manager of the Mercury drug works. The judge was a new one, a judge who looked like a judge should look.
There they are, thanks to you,
said Haynes, pointing. 2 as clever criminals as ever plagued the system. We've been a long time catching them. But their career is over now.
Our local operative, known as Brown 2, has been trying for months to locate the source of the Trilobane flood, but without avail. The Venusian authorities blocked him at every turn, but there was nothing we could do about that unless we could hang a federal offense on them. It was you who did that for us. I am very glad I gave you that identification ring after our cleanup on Callisto and the list of the secret addresses of our agents. I felt then that you were a man of discretion and would not abuse its privileges, and today I most certainly am more than justified. When I interviewed you in your cell, though,
Inspector Haynes grinned at Hank's surprise.
Pretty effective disguise, eh? Well, as I was about to say, you gave me all the tips that were needed. First of all, your mention of the Scourge of Pagras told me it was Trilobane you had aboard, for that is a distillation of Pagra venom. That gave us jurisdiction. I attended the secret auction and tried to bid. Everything in the ship went for a song to von Kleber's pals, but when I went to bid on the Troglodyte hides I ran into stiff opposition. They were not to be had at any price. So I stopped bidding. Our operatives trailed those hides through 5 sets of owners before we came to the collector himself. Early this morning we made our raid and took in all their supplies of drugs and 25 of their peddlers. Previously, we had raided Mercury and those men came in about an hour ago. They had quite a thriving little business, and why we didn't think of their method of smuggling in the Trilobane before this I'll never know. We knew, of course, that it must be coming in the ships that they confiscated. That much we were sure of. but we couldn't prove a damn thing until we knew how. Thanks to you, the ring is busted now, and we can do something for those poor devils who were innocently duped into being carriers of the drug. Winners have already been sent to the swamp to bring back your friends. And there you are. You'll find your old swapper in the yard, completely overhauled and stocked to the gunwales with greater trade goods.
Hank Karns, trader, tugged at his grizzled beard and looked rather sheepishly at the floor.
Dag it all.
He said,
That's fine enough.
But gosh, I sure hated to make a damn fool of myself in front of everybody that away.
Inspector Haynes broke into laughter and crossed over and slapped him on the back.
You old liar. You loved it.
I hope you enjoyed reading the book 4-1/2b Eros with me. If you like this, please remember to like and subscribe. Please visit at Autonomy if you want to see different types of videos we produce. For statistics on our videos, visit at Autonomy Core. Happy YouTube travels!